Hello and welcome to Rock, Paper, Shotgun for another game that features all three of those things. The Sinking City's hero, Charles Reed, has a shotgun to fight off whatever the hell this is. He collects bits of paper as clues, and he can hit things with a brick, which is basically a rock with ideas above its station. He does all this in the aid of uncovering H.P. Lovecraft-inspired secrets in the flooded town of Oakmont. On paper, this looks like a fascinating take on the detective game, but after 15 hours, I'm not so sure. I'm going to break down what doesn't work and pick out a few things that do.
You cannot build here. It's cursed. Cursed. The sky smote the carpenters for their sins. You cannot build a church in this place.
I'm guessing it wasn't suicide.
From the outset, Frogwares get a bonus point just for making a detective game. I'm a fiend for virtual investigations. It stems from my love of crime fiction. I love the sensation of opening a harmless door and finding a horror show to solve. I love the trench coats and stylish suits of the 1920s. The less said about the unlockable octopus hat, the better. I love mulling over a case while a random man eats a rat on a stick. And I love running circles around cops. Even ones so dumb that they can't say time properly.
Don't waste my time, newcomer.
But most of all, I love mystery stories. The idea of taking those tales but replacing chubby Inspector Poirot with my equally chubby self is basically my dream game. But interactive mysteries are hard. You need to give people enough space to make deductions, to do the work of a detective, but without becoming a sloppy soup of information for amateur sleuths to drown in. Most crime games fear that pitfall and are linear as a result. Think of Ace Attorney or Frogwares' previous Sherlock Holmes games. You follow a fixed breadcrumb trail and draw connections between the clues. Job done. You can't fault the Sinking City for having bigger ambitions. It appears to be looking to a different Sherlock game for inspiration, the classic 1980s board game Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. This was an attempt, a very successful one, to simulate a city packed with clues. It gave you a narrative scenario and a directory of London addresses. If you wanted to interview a suspect or get a clue analysed by an expert, you could look up their residence, find the corresponding entry in the gamebook, and see what they had to say. Under it all, it's the same breadcrumbs, but you feel like you sniffed them out for yourself. And this is what the Sinking City is trying to do, only instead of representing the city in text, it's a place you can walk around and follow leads without flipping to a page number. At the heart of this idea is the lack of objective markers, a decision Frogwares talked up a lot in the run-up to release. The idea goes that instead of decorating the map with icons of every key location, you have to read the map to find the places you're looking for. You'll be giving a street intersection in one of the 6 districts and left to find it yourself. And when you do, you manually place a flag. And I'm not sure this is as interesting as they think it is. I mean, really, all you've done is replace the line of code for the objective icon with a human that does the same job. You place flags and follow them. How is that any different to the game placing flags and you following them? I felt the same way about Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which tried to inject mystery by swapping map icons for vague descriptions. It would say, the thing you want is west of blah, so you'd go to the question mark west of blah. It wasn't rocket science there, and it ain't rocket science here. The fact is, you're given an address, and as long as you can find it, it'll be important. In Consulting Detective, the magic was in the dead ends. When you did find the thread of the story, you really felt like you found it. I wonder if Sinking City would be more interesting if it gave you a vague street address and then had you use building descriptions or photographs to identify a location. Instead, you go to the address and interact with the one door that opens or the one pier with a mooring point. It's very underwhelming. The knock-on effect of setting a mystery across an entire city is that you have to build an entire city, and that's a big step up from what Frogwares were doing in their Sherlock games. Those were self-contained locations packed with handcrafted detail. With the new spread of the city, that detail is lost, and quite aggressively so. Within each district you'll see so many repeated buildings and burnt-out cars and slapdash street furniture that you're dependent on the map to tell streets apart. I wonder if the preposterously over over-the-top god rays are just to blind you from seeing what a state the city is, or just to disguise the violent pop-in. And it's good the game gives you a spirit vision to identify interactive doors, as so much of Oakmont blurs into a sludgy mess. I mean, quite literally when the textures fail to load and you get, well, whatever that's meant to be. I mean, talk about a cosmic horror. Other members of the RPS team have raised the idea that it might be intentional. It's meant to be a doomed city, and perhaps this dismal world is trying to capture the end times. But the effect of trawling through the mud and scattering of sleepwalking NPCs is entirely off-putting. It's really hard to invest in a place so clearly gone to shit. I mean, like, who are these people? Why is there a guy covered in blood and another one carrying a big rake thing? Why are people selling newspapers in the middle of the night? I can't work out if it's a descent into madness or just plain old crap. Enter the nondescript buildings and the effect is even more extreme. It's like the architects of Oakmont have only 10 building designs to construct the whole city, so you're constantly hit with deja vu. You'll recognise entire cloned apartments, only different in the scatter of clues specific to the case. You'll go through countless factories, all building different products, but somehow with the exact same machinery and furniture. I know games have stretched assets since time immemorial, but I can't recall such shameless photocopying, and it can be detrimental to your mission. Several times I thought I'd found the wrong address because I recognised it from a previous case, and it did make me laugh to see one mission revolve around doppelgangers, people terrified they are being replaced by clones, but they're not concerned that their house was an exact replica of their neighbours.
Be safe. We don't have any free beds left.
If Frogwares' reach exceeds its grasp, this doesn't mean the sinking city is a total horror show. One area that it does capture the magic of consulting detective is in its use of research as a mechanic, something they've dabbled with in previous games but have really fleshed out here. Some clues hint at avenues of investigation you can open by consulting records, medical files at the hospital, incident reports at the police station, and so forth. If someone says the new mayor talked about a house in an interview, you could head to the newspaper and search for recent interviews with town officials. You soon get into the habit of scanning clues for research potential. The game flags some with a book icon, which feels heavy-handed to me, and once you've connected a clue to the right source, it's easy to find an answer. But that simple act of having to make the connection, of realising that someone might have a fresh marriage licence, say, or that a past injury was probably dealt with at the hospital, feels like a spark of proper detective work missing from the city navigation. There are tiny flashes of Her Story, another great investigation game, in the art of looking for similarities to further your adventure. I just wish this had been at the heart of the game, instead of used once or twice per case. Once Reed reaches crime scenes through map reading and research, the action resembles a more traditional Frogwares mystery. You are pixel hunting for clues, with big handprints making them hard to miss, and using your mind's eye to uncover memories of past events. This is nothing you haven't seen in Sherlock vision in other Holmes games, although Sherlock admittedly never followed a ghost crow to a hidden body, unless he was hitting the opium harder than usual. Once you've gathered information, Reed uses retrocognition to reconstruct the past, numbering ghostly scenes in the order they occurred. It's an idea that worked well in other detective games. It was great in The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, as it underlines your findings and proves you have the general shape of what happened. But the cases in the sinking city are often very obvious, and repeating them only draws attention to that. Do you think the killer opened the door before murdering the guy inside the room? If you can work out this super tough conundrum, you can solve 95% of the sinking city. Another idea lifted from the Sherlock games, there are a lot of them, is the Mind Palace, where you combine clues into deductions. This was Frogwares' best innovation in their Holmes games, as clues were open to interpretation and you could lead to different conclusions. You could logically show how several suspects could have done the murder, and so it was up to you to look deeper and pick the correct answer. The Sinking City allows Reed to draw multiple conclusions based on the evidence, whether you see a man as a homicidal maniac attack or an avenging angel can change your perspective on a case. But the difference is, the outcomes you pick between are almost all based on personal opinion. They are more moral dilemmas than fixed crimes to solve. Often the case is open and shut, and it's just down to you to choose whether to dob people into the authorities. Perhaps this is just the peril of working in the Lovecraft universe. You are dealing in cases of the unknowable, cosmic horror beyond man's comprehension. But to make us play as a detective who has to shrug off outcomes and chalk it up to weird Lovecraft shit, I guess, is unsatisfying. Maybe Lovecraft fans will have less of a problem with it. I'll admit I'm not hugely into the man's work.
So, where are the potatoes?
While investigations mix familiar ideas and newer ideas that don't quite land, there is fun to be had in The Sinking City. By drawing on Lovecraft's work, the cases boast unusual twists that prevent them from sinking into crime cliches. A hidden body is much more interesting when it's been hidden inside a mirror realm, for example, and there's a bit of unpleasantness involving body doubles that makes for a sinister riff on a kidnapping plot. I bounced off some of the broader social unrest. There are racial tensions between Oakmont's humans and fishmen, but they're hard to invest in when everyone you meet is an evil bastard. But that said, I was intrigued enough to follow the plot for 10 or so hours. Side quests can double that playtime, but there is an awful lot of basic collection quests in the mix. I also appreciate having separate difficulty settings for investigation and combat. My suggestion is to raise detective difficulty to remove crime scene hand-holding, but lower combats to get it over with. Gunplay is weightless garbage with a survival horror-y resource management edge, which it then undermines by filling every cupboard with bullets or bullet parts. So dial down enemy difficulty and waltz through it. Shooting is mainly boring, so the less of it you do, the better. There's also a sanity meter which depletes when enemies attack or you witness occult things. I had high hopes for some Eternal Darkness style hallucinations, but what you actually get is blurry pictures of Reed being hung and the occasional shadow beast to distract you. It's pretty limp. I still think it's mad that Shigeru Miyamoto, the father of Mario, had a hand in making Eternal Darkness, which is still the best HP Lovecraft video game. Oh, and there are some underwater bits. They look like this. Do you want to climb up rocks in a cumbersome metal suit? If you're watching this channel, I think you're likely a smart human being, so you probably don't. But they only last about 10 minutes of the whole game, which is why my opinion doesn't really extend beyond a casual shrug. And that's the problem with The Sinking City. You should never shrug in a detective game. You're meant to hunch, to lean into the screen because you're so entangled with the case. On paper, there's so much here that should get you into the investigative trance, a world that doesn't lead you by the hand and mysteries that break out of the genre mould thanks to a cast of elder gods and other writhing puzzles. But the resulting game is almost as linear as any Frogwares has made before, only with weedy pop guns and miles of ugly filler in between. It's an interesting misstep, but a misstep nonetheless. I hope you enjoyed this trudge through the mud of Oakmont. If you are looking for some better detective games, I'll pop some suggestions in the description and the comments. If you have any questions about The Sinking City, pop them below and I'll answer them as soon as humanly possible. Oh, and if you enjoyed the video, maybe give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. We'll try and give you good PC fun all the time. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.